Welcome, everybody, to another episode of John Webster Film. I am your host, John Webster, and with me today is Nessie, and we're back talking about HBO's Rome. We're going to talk season 2 today. So, how you feeling, Nessie, after finishing it up?
Marathon stream. I'm just going to say I did a marathon stream session over the last 24 hours, and what a ride. Season 2 is so full of ups and downs, twists and turns. Hold on to your hats, people.
Yeah, the thing that I really noticed watching this time, which I don't think I realized I probably realized it, I just didn't remember from my initial viewing and in past viewings, is how enormous the scope of this season is.
It truly is.
Because it's actually shorter than season 1 by a couple episodes, but it feels enormous because they had to cram so much in. And it's just amazing because, we'll go through the different story elements starting in a second, but just to think that the first episode starts with the direct aftermath of Caesar's assassination. And to think that then we go all the way to Octavian seizing complete power after defeating Antony and Cleopatra, it's
mind-blowing.
It just feels like it's almost like every couple of episodes is a season's worth of material onto itself. Right. And it feels like so much has occurred by the end of the season.
Yeah, I felt the same way, John. They got so much done in such a short amount of time, and they didn't skip a beat either on the way that they did it. I felt like they were telling the story, and that they weren't skimping on things. They told a good story.
Yeah, we were just talking about this a second ago. It does. You can see where there are elements that would have been expanded upon had they been able to go another couple seasons, because the original plan, I believe, was to go for about 5 seasons. And I'm not exactly, I think season 2 was originally supposed to go up to the defeat of Brutus and Cassius. And then season 3 was going to be the sort of, I actually think seasons 3 and 4 were going to be dealing with leading up to Antony going to Egypt, and then it was going to spend a couple seasons in there with him and Cleopatra. And then season 5 was actually supposed to be about the Messiah. And you can see the roots of that in the season where they still dealt with some story elements of that. They just unfortunately didn't get to bring that to fruition.
Right. It was just a nod to, what would be further in the political spectrum, because let's face it, Octavian, his reign as emperor was the longest, most stable reign of any of the Roman emperors, and it was such a long span that there's so much happened historically that they had a lot to work with had they ever really gotten into his reign. So.
Yeah. Leaf. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff that they could have drawn from it. We've just talked about what it was, what they were originally planning to do. And essentially, they got up to, I guess, probably about where it was probably about 3 or 4 seasons worth of material that they squeezed into this one season. And I have to say, it's a remarkable job that they did it as well as they did. Certainly watching it, I feel there was some missed opportunities, but on the whole, I don't know how they could have done it any better than they did. So, so it's kind of mixed feelings in that regard. But I mean, not mixed feelings about the season. I thought they did a great job, but yeah, it's just you kind of think about what could have been. But unfortunately, it did come in that time when HBO didn't yet know how valuable DVD sales were going to be, and so they were a bit short-sighted in that regard.
Right. There's an executive somewhere that's just kicking himself in the pants or herself in the pants for letting this one kind of slip through their fingers, because, I mean, just what an amazing job they were able to do and pull off in 2 seasons. That,
Yeah, and to give an overview, just in case I'm very happy that several of you seem to have gone ahead and watched the show along with these streams. For anybody who hasn't, basically the season picks up in the aftermath of Caesar's assassination. I mean, it picks up literally
every day.
Yeah, right after, to the point where they actually show Antony walking out of the Senate chambers. And then you go through basically the sort of politics of the fight between Antony, Octavian, and Brutus. Right. And that takes you to about halfway through the season. And after they end up defeating Brutus, and there is actually a battle in this season that they show. It's nothing much by Game of Thrones standards, but considering they didn't do one in the first season, I thought they did a pretty good job. But anyway, so after that, then the season transforms into the rivalry between Octavian and Antony, and leads to Antony going to Egypt, everything with Cleopatra, and then the season and the show wrap up after that. So with that said, and that was just to give you guys an overview of what happened now, and we can get into the nitty-gritty because there's any number of places we can start talking about this season. Oh, hi, Sanry. We got Sanry and Aaron, because I actually did drop them a line in our chat group we have, so so then they won't be mad at me this week. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about sort of that immediate aftermath of Caesar's assassination, because that first episode really does feel like it's just a direct continuation of season 1. It feels very season 1 compared to a lot of the other episodes.
Yes.
I mean, to the point where, it picks up, Caesar's still on the Senate floor, Vorenus is still cradling his wife.
Everyone is covered in blood.
Yeah.
It's so dramatic. It's chaos is what it is. It's chaos. Everyone is just cannot believe that the great Caesar, the man of the people, the people's champion, has been murdered on the floor of the Senate by the Senate, branded as a tyrant and a traitor and corrupt, and it's just chaos in Rome. The people are about this close to revolting and just riot in the streets. So everything afterwards is pretty much
chaos. It's chaos.
Yeah.
And
everything that's done in the immediate aftermath is kind of to restore order in the immediate future until they can basically regroup politically and see how things shake out. So there's these deals that are made immediately, which otherwise these people would probably not, have committed to.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite moments because it kind of fulfills that promise of seeing Antony as second in command for all of season one. It is one of my favorite moments when he finally, because he's chased through the streets of Rome
Yeah.
by Pompey's son. That's so far back. I'm trying to remember his name. Quintus Pompey.
Mm-hmm.
And so he finally makes it back to Attia's place, and she's surprised to see him because she assumes he's dead.
Yeah,
and
nobody knows what's going on.
He rushes in, and it's that direct cut to first thing he does is and he takes a bath to basically wash all the blood off, and he's already fuming. He's like, "I will kill them all," and it's just that feeling of yes. Now Mark Antony is unleashed, and this is what we get for season 2. It's so much fun because James Purefoy, his performance is so amazing.
It's so good. It's so good. He really shines in this season.
Yeah, because he's pushed into the forefront, from the get-go, and it's great to see because Antony is a great character, and he's a great actor, and it's what you want to see coming out of season 1.
Yeah. I mean, of all the characters in, Roman history at this time, Mark Antony's he's a boss, he is just a boss. He has a line later in the season, when I don't want to get to the details of it yet because we'll work up to that, but a character has just committed suicide in a very dramatic fashion. and he says, "Now that is an exit." That is an exit. He's got so many good lines in this show.
I love it. Yeah. And another character who we see in the immediate aftermath of this is Brutus, who comes running back in, and he is just torn apart. He's a broken man for much of this season.
I know, and that one scene where he's in the I think he's in the Far East. He's sort of been semi-exiled for his part in things, and he's in the Far East, and nobody really knows. He's like they think he's a coward. Oh, you struck a blow on a dying man. Oh, you're such a great warrior. And he's really broken. He's let himself go. He doesn't look like himself. And then there's that one scene where he before he comes back to Rome, where he's down by the river. He just strips himself off, and it's basically like a baptismal scene where he's just reborn at that point because he has found new purpose. Once more he's gonna be the guy to save the Republic, live up to his family name and save the Republic from itself, from another would-be tyrant. And it's just really a great scene.
Yeah, going back to in the first episode, though, it's that great shot where he's running and he's completely unnerved, and his mother is basically his strength in that moment, and she's holding his hand steady. Mm-hmm. And it's great the way the camera just pans down to his bloody hands in the water, and she's just holding them still.
Oh yeah, when he's washing the blood off of his hands.
Yeah.
And once again, this season shows that really it's the women behind the scenes that are just the strength that these characters depend on. They're just such strong, forceful, vibrant women that are the movers and shakers of what's going on.
And it's part of the reason why I really wanted when I was designing the title card for this week, I made the conscious choice to put Atia on there because I wanted to highlight the women of this season, because even more so than the first season, they're really the central players for a lot of it. And Atia has such a journey.
She does. She is literally scrapping and striving and conniving, and oh God, I love her just for survival of not only herself, her children. She is like a cat with 9 lives, but
yeah, Aaron, otherwise known as when I've been lazy for a couple days.
Hey, Padar's in the chat.
Hi, Padar. Thanks for coming by, Padar. Yeah, definitely watch it. We're gushing about it now. It's so wonderful. So I guess we should go ahead and talk about Vorenus and where we find him. He goes into a very dark place in the beginning of this season, and it wasn't always the easiest stuff to watch, I have to say. Because
destroyed.
The immediate aftermath of what he experienced in the finale, he doesn't really go the direction that you hoped he would. I think that final moment of season 1, you see the look in his face, and you hope that he's going to make a good choice coming out of it, and boy, does he does not.
No.
He's angry. He's in grief, like in terrible grief, and I think he's just angry at everything and everybody, and he curses his children because he feels that betrayal, and unfortunately it's in his nature to kind of go overboard in that regard. He still has a way to go, and I think he makes, his character arc is very satisfying this season, because I think he does eventually get there.
It takes the entire season really to get where he should have been.
Yeah.
And
unfortunately, that it's a fatal mistake, because he curses his children, he storms off in anger, and that has a twofold effect. One, it convinces his children that he in fact killed their mother
and doesn't care about them.
Yeah. And two, the fact that he storms off opens them up to be taken captive and sold into slavery, because once again, it feels like these events were so far back, I don't even remember the name of the crime lord he was battling with throughout season 1, and who actually takes his children captive. It's one of the names that I unfortunately don't have written down.
Oh, well, we'll forgive you, John. I'll have to, because I can't remember it either.
Yeah. Wait. I'm going to take that back. Here we go. Erastes Fullman. That's
it. Good job, John.
Yeah, and by the end of the episode, he figures out who has taken the children, but Erastes is so hell bent on his vengeance and revenge that he says that, and point blank, he says the most brutal thing, which is that he raped them and then threw their bodies into the river.
Yeah.
And that's the end of him. Vorenus chops his head off, and that's the beginning of his dark descent.
Yeah, because he takes that trophy home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of gross. But thank the gods that he has such a good friend in Pullo.
Yeah.
Pullo really, where Vorenus was keeping Pullo afloat in season 1. In season 2, you can see the opposite effect where Pullo is bringing Vorenus, keeping him afloat and keeping him going. So this is definitely at this point a two-way street for these guys.
And once again, I mean, I just, you just can't help but be completely fascinated by the journey that Pullo goes on throughout this season, especially when you see who he was in season 1. He becomes a force to be reckoned with, and a complete person by the end.
Right. He really starts, instead of being just a drunken brute, or he really starts being the one who's the calm one, the rational one, the one that tries to keep Vorenus on an even keel. So it's,
that said, he still has his moments of rage.
Of course he does.
As we see. And something we should amend from last week, we didn't have the chance to talk about his relationship with Irene.
Oh, yeah.
Who
so tragic.
Who's a slave girl that he rescues, but then he falls in love with her, and then does something rather rash, shall we say, when he discovered that she was set to marry another slave once they got their freedom. And this is the old Pullo's kind of brute nature, where his first instinct is to kill the guy. And it's like he doesn't even think about it. It's something that he does on pure instinct. And again, it's it's the same thing with Vorenus and his rage. It's you want these guys to be better than that. And however, he does try to make amends by the end of season 1. And as we come into season 2, I almost wonder if this is one of the elements that got rushed along. I know that they didn't. I think that they weren't sure about the fact that they were going to have to cram everything in until they were a little bit further along in the season. But they do have Irene kind of forgive him rather quickly. But you could also attribute that to the fact that he has asked for forgiveness from the gods, and she is also in a situation where she might not be completely confident about her own security and her place in the world. So that might encourage her to accept his proposal. In any case, they do form a loving relationship throughout the season, which is met with tragedy, and it's heartbreaking to see. But before we get too far along with that, I know there are certain points that I do want to hit before we get too far along. Yeah, the first episode does also start with Octavian really asserting himself, and he's actually played by 2 actors this season. In the first 2 episodes, he is still played by Max Pirkis, and then starting with episode 4 onward, he's played by Simon Woods, who, for those of you who watched my Pride and Prejudice stream last week, he is the actor who played Mr. Bingley in that. A very, very different role. But Yeah. So, what did you think about the casting change? Nessie?
Well, I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it because they were going to have to skip and you know, fast forward in a way. The role going forward for Octavian required an older actor to play because they were going to be going further along in his, in his life. And Max Perkins, even though he was great as young Octavian, great. But in this particular instance, they did need an older actor. So I was not upset by the choice or by the change. Um, he did a fantastic job as an older, aged up Octavian.
Yeah, I remember.
And they did it in such a way that you knew, okay, Octavian is gone, and then he left his mother and sister behind to go off and make a name for himself um in a way, and he was going to be absent. So when we see him leave as Max, and then quite a while later, we see him come back as
Yeah, Bernie. I mean, it was just necessary, unfortunately, because once they were going to cover such a wide span of time for the season, but by the end of the season, you can't have Octavian being played by a young kid. I mean, I don't know if he could have been anywhere from 16 to 18 probably at the time, the actor that is. And by the end of the story, I mean, I'm sure he's meant to be in his 30s or so.
Late 20s, early 30s, easy.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it was just the nature of it. They were going to have to go that route. Again, it's unfortunate if the show had gone on for multiple seasons, I believe they probably would have kept the same actor. And to Simon Woods' credit, I think he actually did a really good job in his early scenes in episode 4 of really bridging that gap. If you watch him, a lot of his mannerisms in those first couple scenes are very reminiscent of what Max Perkis was doing, and the way he says Titus Pullo, that first line is very much just like Max Perkis would say it. So yeah, it's just one of those things they had to do. Do I think it's seamless? No, I think that Simon Woods, by the end of the season, is playing it differently than Max Perkis would have. I mean, obviously, he's a different actor.
Right.
And I think he had the disadvantage of playing Octavian starting with when he becomes a much darker character, and so doesn't have the benefit of being a bit more likable in the other actor did. So, but all things considered, I think the performance he delivers is great. And but yeah, it was a situation where they didn't have much of a choice, and I think they did about as good a job as can be expected.
It could have been a lot more awkward.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny because it worked better for me this time because I kept track of the passage of time. And this time around, I remember the first time I watched it, it seemed like only about 3 months had passed in between the actors, and I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. But actually watching this time, if you pay attention, there's about a year, give or take, in between when we see the character, and that doesn't completely account for aging up like that, but it's enough time that I buy it. So
right. And then just keeping the same actor for the entire season rather than having younger actor early in the season, and then the older actor. I think it worked. It was a little awkward, but I think it worked.
Mm-hmm.
I
But
didn't
he certainly nails the ruthlessness and
just the utter lack of, I don't want to say emotion, but affection or any type of. I mean, he's so cold.
yeah.
He really is so cold, and playing just captures that very well. It's creepy. Eerily so.
Yeah.
But he's such a good contrast against Mark Antony that, you really, because Mark Antony is so vibrant and passionate and outspoken, and you want to love that guy, and then Octavian is more cold, calculating, ruthless,
It's I think it's one of my favorite bits with him. It's that showdown at the end of the season between him and Cleopatra.
Oh.
And she sees right through it, but she's putting on a very good performance of of believing it. And it's a sign of how cold and removed he is, that he thinks that she's actually bought into it.
Oh, he says, I was very warm.
Yeah. And it's like, no, dude, you're not good at pulling that off.
No, he can't even fake it. That was his best effort at it. And it was like, dude, man, you're like a snake. No offense against snakes. Sorry, Sandry. No,
and no pun intended, considering
what happened. Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't want to spend too much time just on the premiere, the season premiere, because we have a lot to cover. But I love all the stuff with Antony and his sort of political maneuvering that he pulls with Brutus and Cassius.
Oh yeah.
And Brutus, unfortunately, he severely underestimates Antony. He thinks that he understands him, and he clearly doesn't. He thinks that, he even says, I can't remember exactly, when you overestimate him or something to that effect. He thinks he won't be as dangerous as he is. And so they go along with these political niceties that actually comes from Octavian. It's his idea to basically wipe the slate clean, declare general amnesty, and everything sort of goes the way it goes. But of course, Antony is a genius at playing the crowd. And so at Caesar's funeral, he turns completely against Octavian. And it's interesting that we don't even see his speech at the funeral.
What I would have given to have seen that speech. That would have been phenomenal.
Well, because I think it plays against your expectations, because everybody expects to see the big, Mark Antony speech, which is, pretty famous.
Mm-hmm. Or at least according to, the play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, the content of his speech in the show is different based on what's described afterwards. But just the way they cut right to the aftermath, and you can see just by the look on Brutus's face how bad his situation is. And it's the way Antony, talks about it. He's like, perhaps a bit too cerebral for that crowd.
Yeah, because he knew his audience. He knew he knew how to interact and speak with the common the common people, having spent so many years in the military, and just, being able to relate to, to them, to play up to the plebs, so to speak. He knew he was much more savvy in that. And of course, Brutus, bless his heart, he meant well, but he plays to a different crowd. He could deliver a wonderful speech in the Senate chamber, to the Roman elite, and appeal to their history and their sense of historical precedents, or doing whatever, and persuade senators. But you get in front of a crowd, they're likely to throw cabbages and tomatoes at him just as much, as anything else. So, and that scene too, where they're Caesar's cremation scene, that was just, that to me, that was a phenomenal scene, because you the shot where you're looking down from above, and there's just giant crowd surrounding it, and everyone is just there. They're just throwing more and more, wood on the fire for it to burn, as like, tribute to Caesar. It's just a great shot.
Yeah, Bernie, and you're right. And I think that's exactly what they were going for with that in casting, where she's not traditionally what, especially at the time. I remember there was a lot of talk about how she didn't necessarily look like a lot of people expected Cleopatra to look, but she
exactly like how I expected Cleopatra.
Oh, did you? Well, I mean, I'm just basing that off of what I remember at the time, but yeah, she does just ooze sexuality, and just the actress's performance was stunning, because you have to hand it to her, especially in this season, because she's in one of the early episodes of the season, but then she's not in it again until about the last two episodes. And her and James Purefoy really have to craft this romance and this love that you believe in over the course of those two episodes, for something that would have been played out over probably like 2 seasons, in the original plan for the show. And just the fact that they sell that, they really do, to the point where you believe Antony's grief when he believes that Cleopatra has taken her own life, and without him, it's no easy thing to sell that to an audience in such a short amount of time. And they really did a great job. And her performance is just stunning.
Absolutely.
And
I mean, you believe, I would believe that was Cleopatra. Yeah. Just her bearing, her mannerisms, the way she spoke. When she would enter a room, all eyes would be on her. She, like Bernie said, she stole every scene that she was in. She just had that charisma about her that you could see how this woman could captivate, powerful rulers like Caesar and Mark Antony, and have them, protect her. So that's it was very believable.
And Beth, yeah, I talked a bit about this last week. I don't know that the people who worked on Game of Thrones took anything from this, but I certainly see a lot of similarities between the productions, especially if you look at the first season of Game of Thrones, with everything like set in King's Landing, the way they handled the battle scenes, with sort of showing the beginning and the end, and just kind of, just stepping over the middle. I think season 1 of Game of Thrones really had a lot of similarities to Rome. And I remember I remember feeling watching that in that first season that it was like taking a Song of Ice and Fire and putting a Rome spin on it almost. And so, yeah, I mean, I see the similarities, and I do think that Rome is the precursor to Game of Thrones, the television show, and which is why I recommend it to Game of Thrones viewers, because I think there's a lot of crossover appeal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to a character who's introduced this season, who I think is actually quite interesting, but I think she's underserved by the brevity of the season, which is Gaia. Because there's actually a lot that's interesting about her. It's just unfortunate that I think as a result of cramming so much into one season, she comes off, I mean, she does do villainous things, but she comes off very much as a villain. And I feel like a wider amount of screen time over the course of multiple seasons might have added a lot more complexity to her role. But having said that, the actress, who I believe was also on Lost, she was on a season or two of Lost, and she was really good in the role. But yeah, again, it's just unfortunate that a lot of these elements, these characters and elements, got introduced probably with the intention of expanding them over the course of multiple seasons, and unfortunately, it just didn't happen.
Not really getting the chance to. I mean, she did have a fairly, even though it was a brief arc, she did have a fairly decent, and again, made sense.
Yeah, again, hats off to her, because just one episode after she's done this horrific thing, which is the murder of Irene, later on, we spend one episode where we see what's developed into a loving relationship between her and Pullo. And to her credit, I think she actually sells that really well.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I think Pullo has developed feelings for her, because obviously he didn't know about the poisoning, or she would have been dead before then. And, in this deathbed confession, she would have just about gone to her grave keeping that secret. but
I do like that she's prepared in that moment to die at his hand, because she knows that's what's going to happen, and she knows him. And I do like the fact that that's that element of Pullo where he reacts without even thinking. So he hears that, and he just immediately, his instinct is just, she has to die, and
even though she was literally dying right there.
Yeah.
So, yes, she dies by his hand. In a way, it was, she would have died, she would have died anyway. Maybe it was a mercy, because she had an abdominal wound. She could have lingered for days and days, in severe pain. But maybe she was goading him into doing something, because she didn't want that type of a death.
I don't think so. But just based on the performance, I got the impression that she legitimately did want to basically unburden herself of that. Again, it's a credit to the actress for being able to sell that character growth over the course of a single episode. But the fact that he does at that point, any affection he had is really gone, because he, takes her out and just
at the end of the swamp.
Yeah. Which was a great way to end that episode.
Yep, Pullo just taking out the trash.
see what. Okay, and that whole story with the Collegium, which starts off early on in the season after Pullo goes to Antony and convinces him to come help get Vorenus out of this funk he's in, and Antony uses
a swift kick in the pants is what he did.
Yeah, which is great. It's the fact he says, stand at attention when I'm talking.
On your feet, soldier. He just did it without even thinking about it. It's just so drilled into him for so long that he couldn't, resist that military tone of voice from his commanding officer. Even though he was, he had been discharged, he was a soldier to the end of his days. So yeah, that was exactly it got him out of bed. We'll put it that way. It didn't cure all of his ills by a long shot.
No, because that's the beginning of his descent, where he, for a while, until he learns his children are still alive, he is in such a dark place. He's smashing idols and saying that he's a son of Hades.
He's cursed.
Which is a really bad thing.
It doesn't get a lot lower than that. He's the god of death incarnate. And people just need to back away and be afraid of him because he has 0 F's to give. At that point, he's brutal. He'll order a murder. He just dives right into the underbelly, the underworld of Rome. The Collegium is kind of what you would think of as, the precursors to like modern gangsters. Yeah. Everybody, their territory. They all want a piece of the pie. When everybody's getting along, that's when there's peace or, controlled chaos. And so that's, and the politicians are paying them to do this, to keep this area of this vitally important area of Rome under their, under control, to keep it to keep the money rolling in. Everybody wants their piece of the cut, from the dock workers down in, unloading the grain shipments all the way up to the courtiers and the people around, and the consuls themselves. Everybody wants their cut of the money. So that's just how things are. It's just corruption from the bottom all the way to the top. And I don't think things have changed much in 2,000 years. But it's really cool to see how, like the gangster society worked back then.
Yeah. And he runs a pretty tight ship early on. His tactics are, again, it's a really dark turn for the character, but he has pretty much everybody scared of him. But again, it's what I was saying earlier. This was not the easiest stuff to watch, because we want something better for Vorenus, because we've seen him when he's at his best. It's, when he was happy in his marriage, and he has the capacity to be someone really good. So it's painful to see him, dried down so far.
Yeah, he's even in the depths of his, darkness, he still strives to be an honorable man. I think, to be a man of his word, I should say. He's a man of his word, even if it's not in doing something that is positive. Like when he's has a collegium under his control, and there's some kind of a dispute between one faction and another faction, and he says, nope, guys, I'm sorry, this is how it is. And then he does what he says, and he does what he says he's going to do. You know what I'm saying, John? Where he's like the one faction of the Collegium came to him with a problem about his nephew, that his nephew had been dishonored by prostituting himself basically to, this merchant. And he's like, I want vengeance. I want justice. I need my name restored. And Vorenus is like, well, he paid him, didn't he?
Which is such a horrible thing to
say. Horrible.
Yes, he keeps his word, but any compassion that he would have previously had is gone.
It is very much, it's lawful evil at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, he keeps, his word is his bond, even in the depths of his, his depravity. So, people can still, in a way, trust him, because if he says he's going to do something, he does it. So that just later is, I guess, allows him to redeem himself. That he does his duty. He follows his word all the way through to the end.
Yeah. It's just such a relief, though, when Pullo finds out that the children are still alive, and he comes running to him, and then of course we have that great scene because Vorenus is off at war with Antony, because it's the beginnings of the conflict between Octavian and Antony, and and he basically, and Vorenus at that point goes to Antony and says, sir, permission to leave. And Antony says, see, this is a real soldier. He comes to ask permission before deserting.
Right. And it's really cool because Pullo and Vorenus are aided by both sides, because Pullo comes across, or Octavian comes across Pullo on the battlefield looking for Vorenus. And, when he explains to him, he's found his children, he needs to find him. And Octavian doesn't hesitate, that even though this man has fought against him in this conflict, he knows him to be such an honorable man and a good man at heart, that he wants to do everything in his power to help him find his children. And he pretty much just reaches down, I don't know if it's mud or horse crap or what, and he says, like, hand me a document, and he slaps that on there and presses his seal into it, which is basically a pass to go anywhere within his control, or where anyone will honor his name to get whatever help or service that he can provide. So,
which again, and I have to say that again, talking about Simon Woods' performance in that scene, it's a crucial scene to act as a bridge between the two actors, because the way he acts in that scene, with not even thinking twice about aiding Pullo and by extension Vorenus, it's very much in keeping with the character that we've come to know.
Right.
So it's nice to see that before he transitions into someone that we come to despise.
Yes.
But yeah, and then we have the great scene where where they rescue the children, and it's the first time that the theme music from the opening of the show is played within the show itself. And I always love that moment, because it's like, okay, we've gotten through this really gruesome, horrible chapter, and things are still going to be hard going forward, but things are a little bit better.
Yeah. And you could almost see where that may have been like an ending point for, that where that second season would have possibly ended, because, that's the story started with the loss of Vorenus, his children, and it would have, possibly ended with the scene where he finds his children, and his turnaround is he's completed his, he's returned from the underworld, so to speak.
Although I will say that may be one of the points in which I'm. Oh, hi, Danny. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming by. That may actually be one of the silver linings of the shortened narrative and compacting everything in, because I'm not entirely sure that I would have wanted to see Vorenus going down that dark path for an entire season. Because it's heavy stuff, and it's a relief when he comes out of that.
Yes, we're all like, yes, the children are alive. Yes, he's got his family back, or he's got his kids.
But of course, it's not good for them because they hate him.
Well, they've gone through so much, and yes, they absolutely despise him, and of course blame him for everything that's happened to them. Everything. I mean, it has been a horrible, horrible existence for them for the past year.
Yeah, about a year.
About a year that they've lived in slavery, and backbreaking labor, sexual assault on the daily. Multiple. I mean, they're nothing. They have gone from being like loved and cherished and having, respect and dignity, and to, nothing. When, Pullo warns Vorenus, is like, have you ever been to one of these slave camps before? He says, I need to warn you. And if Pullo says he's got to warn you about how bad things could be, you can expect that it's some pretty heavy stuff. Because, yeah.
And we get a glimpse into what his life has been like, and things that he's gone through in his past.
Yeah, because his mother was a slave.
Yeah.
He was born the son of a slave woman. Fortunately, he got into the army and was able to escape that life somehow, which we never find out how Pullo joined the army. I'm sure he had some phenomenal luck on his side. But yeah, and just to see it's very disturbing. That whole scene there at the slave camp is very, very disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit about everything leading up to the battle in episode 6, which is where Brutus and Cassius meet their end. There's a lot of great stuff throughout the season with Cicero.
Yes.
The way he kind of dances around supporting them until like the last possible moment, and he goes all in, and that ends up being his undoing.
Right. He finally had to commit.
Yeah.
Because he, like you say, he had been dancing on this tightrope now for between Caesar and Mark Antony and Brutus and Cato and Pompey and all these other big political players who are, and he's just walking that fine line. He wants, to see the restoration of the Republic,
I mean, even here we are, it's just mere hours after Caesar has been assassinated, and he goes to see the conspirators, and he's congratulating them on their bravery, and he says, and Mark Antony is dead, right? And they say, no, he's not. And there's that great moment where he's and then he turns around, to see Mark Antony standing behind him, and he just looked like he's seen a ghost. And
Literally, he's seen a ghost because he thought he was dead. So John, we've been going now for about an hour. Did you want to do your mid-roll now?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll talk about what's coming up next week, which I am super excited about. I'm going to be talking about the 1996 Kenneth Branagh Hamlet adaptation. I'm going to be doing that with Lauren, aka Shakespeare of Thrones.
Yeah.
I am just so flattered that she agreed to come on, because as much as, I've seen several Shakespeare films and I love Kenneth Branagh's film, but I am not nearly the expert on Shakespeare that she is. So it's going to be great.
Unless you've got your doctorate in Shakespeareology.
Yeah. So I am super grateful that she's agreed to do that. Now, just to let you all know, there is a slight change in the day for that, because she's not available on Thursday. So we're actually going to be doing it on Friday at 2 p.m. Same time. It'll just be a day later. So make sure that you keep that in mind. And obviously I'll be posting stuff on Twitter and on Facebook and Geek Chat and
all the things.
Yeah, all the places. So, but just remember, it's a day later next week. And as far as I know, I'll be back to Thursdays after that. So it's just for 1 week. But that's going to be so much fun, because if there was any movie that really taught me to love Shakespeare, it's that one. It's a long movie, so if any of you want to watch it, it is about 4 hours long. So it's
pack a lunch.
So it'll be an exercise, but it's very rewarding. It's got such an amazing cast, and it's Kenneth Branagh as he directs it and he acts in it as Hamlet. And what I love about his performances in Shakespeare movies is he just seems to enjoy it so much. And so, yeah,
I have a request.
Yeah, if we do Henry V at a later point, I'll definitely do that. That's a great moment from that movie as well. So yeah, and I am going to keep secret what's coming up the week after that, just because I have quite some interesting guests, so I kind of want to just
hold the surprise
for a bit.
Everybody you're gonna want to tune in for this.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the people coming on, and we're going to be talking about some really fun movies and TV shows. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, and you're going to be talking about a couple of movies coming up.
Yeah. And actually on Here Be Dragons this weekend, I can spoil that because it's already been spoiled. We're going to be doing a talk about Willow. That's on Sunday on Here Be Dragons at 6:00. So be sure to tune in for that. And also, I have one other thing possibly coming up. We're not completely sure yet, but tomorrow I might be doing a chat with Helen on her channel about the Silmarillion again, but we'll be talking about Fëanor and the Noldor elves. Fëanor is a very complex, interesting character, not the most likable, but he is really interesting. So if that goes as scheduled, we'll be posting the normal alerts for it and stuff. So we possibly have that coming up tomorrow. And do you have anything coming up, Nessie, that you want to talk about?
Well, I'm not as prolific as you are, John. It takes me a little while to get things going on my channel. I just did my stream yesterday. My follow up with with Lady Shar. We did the Sir Duncan the Green, which was a crossover episode from my first stream on Garth Greenhand and the one we did Sunday on Sir Dunk. So there was so many parallels that you just couldn't. I just needed to talk extra time, I guess, to talk about them. So we had that yesterday, and then we'll be busy on Here Be Dragons for the the next several weeks. But I would like to, let's see, let me pull up my list of stuff. I've got quite a few things on the back burner, but it's just going to take some time to see which one is going to shake out first. So we'll see. And of course, you guys will be the first to know. I will put it out on all the places, but in keeping with the theme of modern mythology, we might do a MCU, which I know John is not his favorite, but there are a lot of good movies in the MCU. How the MCU is like a modern mythology for the modern man, so to speak. If you're talking about super beings, and what are gods if not super beings? So there's a lot to talk about there. So we'll see what's coming up in the next few weeks.
Good. Yeah, Beth, it's the 1996 Hamlet film, and actually, guys, this is I think I mentioned it last week, but I'll mention it again. Each week, I'll be posting both the trailer for whatever we're discussing on that current stream, and also the trailer for the next week's topic. So if you look in the description, you will find a link to Hamlet, the trailer for Hamlet, rather, so you can get an idea of it. And if you guys are game for a 4-hour adaptation of Hamlet, please do watch it. It's great. So it's a different take on it because it has a different setting than your traditional Hamlet films. It's not modern, but it's more modern than Hamlet usually is, and it's not in a dark castle. It's actually in it's the whole thing is in brightly lit interiors, and it's probably the most beautiful version of Hamlet that's been made. So, and as for where it's available to stream, I don't know that it's available as part of a service. But I know that if you go on Amazon, iTunes, you can probably rent it for a couple bucks. So, but so that's what's coming up next week, and then I'll let you guys know next week what's ahead the following week. But surprise for now, because I do want to hold on to that. But okay, yeah. So I think we can dive back into Rome season 2, and we were talking about Cicero.
Yes,
and it's interesting because it's in that opening episode. They've told Antony to wait outside while they discuss his terms of this this political, deal, which is just BS because Antony is planning to double cross them. And Cicero says,
and they know it.
He says it's not too late. He's here now. I do not, but then he says, I do not urge you to any particular course of action. I only say that if you wanted to. So yeah, even then,
feel like it.
He's not committing because he knows that he's screwed if the wrong person ends up on top. So
absolutely, he's not a fighter. He doesn't command armies. He is a senator, but he's just one of many senators, and his skill is in his rhetoric, in his writings, the things that he has, published to it's kind of like political opinion pieces. And so that's, that's the only power that he has. It's if today you would look at, say, the power of the press. He kind of controls or can spin information. So that's where his power. He doesn't have swords. He doesn't have an army or like men at arms or anything to to back him up. So when you're in the middle of a power struggle between these types of people, like you said, he's really just dancing a fine line on what he can do. And anything it's not so much what he can do, it's what he says. It's always what he says that is important. Like he may be asked to put forward a particular article in the Senate or to support a particular article in the Senate to lend credence to it. Hi, babe.
I just offered $100 for that gallon right there.
You can't have it. Somebody's trying to steal my wine, y'all. Nobody can have it. Well, no, they were going to pay for it, but no, they cannot have it. Guys, in case you've not met him, this is my husband. He's
our special surprise guest.
Yeah, our special surprise guest.
Sorry, guys.
Did you want?
I'm that's $100 sitting right there.
You can't have it.
I have another gallon in there.
No. Mama needs her wine.
Mama can't handle a whole glass.
It'll last me a while. So, yeah. Everybody in the chat says hi.
Howdy.
But yeah, it's the mistakes he made. I hesitate to, I mean, they are mistakes, but you hesitate to say so because he actually finally gains a bit of a backbone.
Well, they're only mistakes because that side loses.
Yeah. And he makes the calculation early on in about episode 3 that Antony and Octavian are going to stay at each other's throats. Which, it's a good calculation to make, honestly. And
right.
It's rather surprising that they're able to temporarily mend fences. And
well, much of that I think has to do with Octavian's part, because he is so dispassionate that he can put, okay, this business is business. We have to do this. So he can.
Are you still there, Nessie?
Oh, yeah. Hi, I'm still here.
Okay, you just cut out for a second. At least.
Oh, sorry about Well, what I was saying was, because Octavian is so dispassionate, he can always put Antony off onto the back burner and deal with him later, where it's more expedient to use him or to work with him to take care of a larger issue, because Brutus, by the numbers game, has many, many more troops. He has 14, I think 16 legions, at his disposal, and Octavian doesn't have half that many. Antony doesn't necessarily have half that many, but should they combine their forces, they're much stronger together.
Yeah, but the calculation at the time is that Antony is going to be, pretty much screwed, and so it's one of the great moments of the season when the words of Marcus Tullius Cicero, where he writes a letter, and one could still call there'd be a temptation to call that a cowardly move, but he's still making a decision in that moment to choose a side. And
he did choose.
yeah. And so just that's the end, the way that Antony's anger just boils over. And it's like, it's the old phrase, don't kill the messenger. Well, he did.
He pretty much did. Don't shoot the messenger. How about if I just, feed him to death?
And that poor guy knows it. He's reading that on the Senate floor, and he's like, oh, crap, I'm dead. So
he knows just as soon as he's like, oh man, you just see the change of expression on his face, and once he starts reading the words and the abject fear.
Everybody starts leaving the
Senate. Yeah, they're just scattering like rats.
And Antony is just sitting there. You see him like gripping onto his seat, and he's going, "Go on."
Yeah.
It's just great. It's really cool to see all the reversals of fortune over the course of this entire season.
Yeah.
But of course, they do eventually mend fences through Attia, who goes to see Antony and acts as a mediator. And they're able to join forces so that they can, fight together against Brutus and Cassius.
Right.
Those poor guys think that they'll have the upper hand. Because they think that the forces are divided, and they're in contact with Cicero at that point in the story. And that's after Brutus's rebirth. And he's feeling really good about himself. And it's so much to the point where when they find out that they're suddenly outnumbered, Brutus says, no more running. This is it.
I mean, at that point too, his mother had sent his father's ring to him, which was so significant to him, because it's like at this point, she finally sees him as, taking his proper place, in the family, doing, this, leading armies and going into battle for the Republic. Where before, when he was with Pompey, they were just like kind of lay around. Okay, we'll let them come to us. And there was never really like a decisive battle. But now he's like thrown it all on the line, for the Republic. He's earned his father's signet ring, which is, I mean, that is a great significance in Roman society, to step into that role. And it's like, in that day, he's like, we're just going to do it. I know they've got the higher numbers.
And in his defense, I mean, numbers aren't everything. They were outnumbered, but not impossibly outnumbered. And we even see in season 1, there's a battle where Caesar is outnumbered. So, it's a gamble, and he takes it. And what I like is that, there's the talk earlier in the season about, people calling him a coward for the way Caesar's death went down, but you can't say that about the way he meets his end.
No, not at all.
He's very brave. We have, a pretty big action scene, battle scene for this show, which in season 1 did not have any, major battle sequences. And this one is, for the time, it was, rather big for being a television show. And
right.
But I think the most amazing part of it comes down to the end, where he takes off his armor and he steps you know,
Everybody else has abandoned him. His army has been defeated, routed. They're fleeing, and it's just like he's making that last stand.
yeah, because Cassius has died at that point, and you know, he tells his remaining supporters who are still there with him to to save themselves. And and what's really poetic about that scene is just the way he goes in. I think he's prepared for it, is the fact that he dies in the same way that Caesar died.
That scene, it was when the shot changes from the direct view to the overhead view, and you just see stab wound after stab wound after stab wound. It was just like the scene where you saw of Caesar's demise, and that struck me. It's so exactly the same way, John. Yeah. And he went out like a soldier, like a Roman.
Yeah.
With honor and dignity, even to the last.
Yeah, I don't think that it's just one of those things where this season had so many balls juggling at the same time that I don't think that Tobias got as much meaty material as he got in season 1, but when he was on screen, he really delivered. And the character arc of Brutus is just a beautiful thing over the course of the show. And I said this last week, it's the reason why a lot of us were really psyched when he was announced for Game of Thrones. And there was a period of a number of years following Rome where he didn't really pop up in that much. I mean, he was probably doing more over in Britain, but as far as like, mainstream productions that were big over in America, I didn't see much of him. I think he had like a really small part in Casino Royale.
Mm-hmm, yeah. I saw that. Yeah, I was like, really? I don't even remember it.
and that was pretty much it. So when he was announced for Game of Thrones, that was really cool. And he didn't have the biggest part in Game of Thrones, but I think it really got him noticed again. Mm-hmm. And
he didn't die.
Yeah, he actually made it out of Game of
all
Thrones.
8 seasons.
And then he got such a wonderful
he got a really juicy role out.
Outlander.
Yes. He got
it's only
really juicy roles out of that one if you think about it.
Yeah, and he was absolutely phenomenal. And he's also now he was in this past season of The Crown. Which is great. He played Prince Philip, so he's getting a lot of great stuff, and it's nice to see because he's an excellent actor. And for a long time, I kept saying, "Man, why isn't this guy in more stuff?" And now he is. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, though I haven't seen The Crown, I really could see him pulling off Prince Philip. I could very much see him in that role.
And but okay, so that ends, and then things shift to a period of peace between Antony and Octavian.
And it's kind of a triumvirate, but it's really a triumvirate in name only, because that one scene, where they're in the chamber, the palace, or they're all together, and Anthony just takes the sword and is like, okay, you take this piece, and you take
I'll take all these pieces, and then he's like, here,
like, well, what do I get? He's like, you can have this little piece of not very significant, Be happy with this. You're lucky we give you anything. Poor Lepidus the schmuck.
And it really is a golden scene when Octavian and Antony are still at war, and Lepidus is sent to strengthen, to strengthen Octavian's forces and to defeat Antony, but all his men desert to Antony.
Yeah. He just walked on the battlefield and they're like, yep, there's our man. But that just is, the charisma that Antony has, that, he was a soldier's soldier, that he's like so popular and everybody just loved him. They're like, we could fight for the stick over here, or we could go with that guy. And that guy looks like, he looks like a winner.
And now, okay, we're getting close to, we have about a half an hour left, or, if we find more we want to talk about, we can go over. But I really do want to make sure that we tackle Egypt in full detail. So it comes to pass that, they have another falling out, and,
and over money.
Yeah, it's over money. And then there's
money.
there's the whole thing where Attia wants to get married to Antony, and then, her asshole son decides, no, actually, he's going to marry my sister instead.
So it's a screw you all the way around. Nobody, I guess he feels like if nobody's happy, he must have done the right thing. Because
it's like,
happiness.
He could say all the reasons in the world why,
Oh, we know why.
But we know it was just to piss them all off, and assert his control.
Yeah. Well, mostly Antony, because in a scene earlier when he had his falling out with his, I think he had where he was falling out with his mother, he just kept saying over and over, "You sent your lover to beat me. You sent your lover to beat me." He had your sweat, your smell all over him. So that's just like, one of those things that are stuck in his head. And
we talked last week about how everything with his mother and, sort of the way she is and the way she flaunted her sexuality in front of him, and it really kind of messed with him. And we see the result of that with his own wife, who he actually says before they're even married, so I'm going to beat you occasionally. I don't want you to think it's because of anything you've done.
Yes, it's just how I get my rocks off.
Yeah.
I may strike you, I may beat you lightly with a riding crop, but you're like, you twisted little fella.
But then of course, she ends up being as twisted as him, because she just, goes all in with it. Because it's a way for her to assert her own control. And so anyway, basically Antony marries Octavia, but that doesn't hold because he's still seen in Attia, and meanwhile she's with Octavian's friend Agrippa,
and everybody's okay with it. Everybody's like, okay, we did this publicly, but in private, we're going to be doing our own thing. And they even they even consummate the marriage repeatedly, so to speak. They're doing,
which I'm sorry, but
one another.
Isn't it such an Antony thing? They're laying in bed awkwardly, and he's like, "It is our wedding night."
It is our wedding night. It's like, dude, You were with her. You were practically her stepdad. You are really. And she's like, "Go ahead, whatever, just do it."
Would you
That
mind
was really,
turning over?
yeah. At this point, it's like just business for her. You know? Oh, it really just that scene was kind of a little squishy for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little squishy.
Yeah, not the not the most pleasant thing, but then of course it does come out through. I don't have the character's name written down, but Octavian's other, like third in command, who is just,
He's a little slimy.
Yeah, he's a sleazy, he was not my favorite character. I mean, the actor does a fine job, but yeah, he was rather despicable.
Yeah.
So
that's part of the political corruption, because he does this for his own reasons.
Yeah.
Not because he just needs this terrible thing is, really weighing on him, and he has to confess it because of, he's such a virtuous person. Dude, really? You were in an orgy last week smoking opium with like 3 girls.
Wait, okay. Speaking of which, before we get on to Egypt, we have got to talk about Jocasta and how much I freaking loved her.
She is like the party girl. You've got to love Jocasta just for the fact that she's got no guile about her whatsoever. She's like that. Like this little ditzy thing who whatever comes in her brain is just going to burble right out. She's got no political gain. And she just blithely mentions when we meet her, it's like, oh yes, my daddy is just filthy rich.
And at first, she comes on and you're like, yeah, okay, so she's this, a random friend of Octavia's who's, a bad influence because she's, getting her to smoke opium and all this stuff. But she really becomes like one of the bright spots of the season because she's just so funny.
She has, like I said, she has no guile whatsoever about her.
And of course, she only gets better once. Well, first of all, it's horrible because Atia, when they're all compiling lists of people that they need to have killed, Atia adds, her family to the list just because she's a bad influence on Octavia.
Right. And
so she's just, her life is ruined, but they marry her off to Pascha, which is like the funniest thing in the world because, she's like not happy about the arrangement at first, but he's like the best anybody could really hope for because
he's really, really good to her. He's good to her. He's kind and she has him wrapped around her little finger, whatever she wants. He just wants to make her happy. And I mean, that's probably the best you can hope for in that time for one of these arranged type marriages. And, and he seems truly devoted to her.
Yeah, Leaf, this is a very different Jocasta. Not at all like the Outlander character. I can definitely say that. But yeah, and it's great. And yeah, he's doing whatever he can to take care of her to the point where he is probably one of the smartest characters in the whole thing because he does his best to become indispensable to a number of people so that he's in a position where in Egypt
always gonna survive.
He takes the right piece of information, goes back to Rome, gives it to Octavian, and automatically Octavian knows that he's loyal, and so he's safe, and so he's able to take care of himself and his wife. But the scene where we're jumping ahead a little bit into the Egypt thing because I wanted to start a little earlier, but let's just talk about the scene where Octavia and Attia arrive in Egypt, and first Jocasta comes out, all in the Egyptian, and then and then Pasta comes out all drugged up and like being like, "No, you shouldn't be out here." And it's like, yeah, hello, bye. And Attia is like, they've all gone insane.
What is going on here? It's Attia. She just assumes she's going to make this grand entrance. She's finally made it. She's gotten out of Rome. She's going to meet her lover, the man that she's loves for so long. He's finally sent for her. She's made arrangements for it, and then she gets there, and they don't even open the door. She's just left sitting hi. She's just left sitting there, kind of like, a beggar in the street, or like, how Servilia was camped outside of her door.
Oh God. Yeah. We didn't get into the details of that. We mentioned it briefly, but yeah, Servilia's final act after Brutus has been killed is to kneel outside of Attia's home and just keep
day
and night, Attia of the Julii, I call for justice. And when Attia finally goes out there, she summons as great a curse as she can think of, and then stabs herself, and then her servant stabs herself. And that's the part where Antony says, "No, that is an exit."
Right. It's kind of like reminiscent of, in old Irish society where people would do like a hunger strike on the, if they feel like they've been wronged, they would sit outside of the person's house and just sit there, and it's like, you have to do something, because what will the neighbors think? What about this stinking corpse sitting outside your house? It's all about, well, what will the neighbors think? And that's what happens with Servilia, because this crowd is just, day after day, this crowd is gathered outside just watching her. Everyone knows who she is. She's been Caesar's mistress. She's head, matron of the Brutus mother. She's Servilia the Julii. She's someone important, and just day after day in the rain, it doesn't matter, with ashes just being sprinkled over her head. So by the time that she finally gets them to open the door, she already looks like a corpse. I mean, she's just covered from head to toe with ashes. She's gray. And it's this scene of, this curse that she puts down on her is just so compelling. You're like, oh my God, if there's a God out there, somebody has listened to this. And like, with all she has left, she says, with the last thing I have, I offer to you to make this curse, to bring this curse down upon you, that you will have no joy of your life. Everything will taste like ashes and iron in your mouth. So it's just this, yes.
Yeah, Anna mentions, and we didn't talk about earlier in the season when Attia has all number of horrible things done to her, and that actually not only is a big moment between those two characters, but that's also factors in with Timon's arc as well, where he finally that's the point where he breaks loose from being under Attia's thrall, so to speak, and the way he cries out, "I am not an animal," and that's the point where he begins his journey onto what you would call a better path.
Right. And that's one of those scenes too that with Timon, you could see his arc had they gone 4 or 5 seasons, especially with, as you say, leading up to the crucifixion of Christ, that Timon, in his arc, he was headed back to Jerusalem, back to his home. So you could really see where that would could have easily occurred. He split from Attia. There's the failed plot with his brother. He couldn't go through. You just see Timon had so much more plot ahead of him had they carried it out.
And I know at one point there had been rumblings about actually doing an HBO film of Rome. I don't know if they had intended that it would be a theatrical release or it probably just on HBO, but one assumes it would have picked up those threads and told that part of the story. But that never came to fruition. So we're still just left with the 2 seasons of the show. But
you're in my lab.
I know, I'm in the lab.
But yeah, so let's talk some more about Egypt because, after they're all found out about, the different affairs and everything, Octavian pretty much banishes
right
Antony and tells him to, go off to his territories. So, Antony leaves swearing to Attia that he's going to send for her. And I think you can see in that moment that he fully intends that that's what he's going to do. You can see the love between them in that goodbye scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of sentiment. They've been together. She is his wife in all but name, so you can tell there's a lot of love and respect between the two. They've been together for so long.
But at the same time, as soon as we get to the end of that episode and he arrives in Egypt and you just see that greeting between him and Cleopatra. I mean, part of it is that we all know the history, Anthony and Cleopatra, but you can just tell from that moment that he's gonna have eyes for her.
Yeah, well, they had unfinished business from their time when she came to visit in Rome. So there was quite a bit of unfinished business on the table there.
What about my question?
One thing what question was that?
Historical.
Oh, my husband wanted to know how historically accurate was this adaptation, John? How do you think it is?
Liberty is definitely taken with the narrative, especially since the central characters are Vorenus and Pullo, who, while they did technically exist in real life, they were not the same as the people depicted in the show. So definitely some big liberties taken there. I think what they really tried to aim for was to be as authentic as possible to Roman society at the time, and to paint an accurate picture in that regard. But they did take liberties as far as when certain things happened, which characters were involved in certain situations. And some characters are, they have some composite characters in there. Just an example is there was no Quintus Pompey, Pompey's illegitimate son in the show. But he's kind of a composite of, some different people, and it's kind of what you would expect, that it takes liberties to tell the story, but I think the broad strokes are pretty true to life, but especially with this last season where everything was folded into, one season. Obviously, they were going to have to condense some things majorly.
One thing that I really wish that we'd gotten to see, we did get the one big battle with Brutus and between Brutus and Octavian and Mark Antony. I really wish that we had gotten to see the Battle of Actium, which was the decisive defeat, for Caesar. I mean, for Mark Antony and Cleopatra. We just see like the end where they're just in a boat running away from it. So it would have.
Yeah, but again, it's like, they were having to squeeze so much into those final episodes, and obviously I feel like they made the right choice highlighting the drama between the characters over taking time out for the battle scene.
Right. And it's the war lasted longer than the end of one season. I mean, the end of one episode and the beginning of the next episode is like, but I mean, I of course I can understand, if they had to cut, of course I'd rather them cut a battle scene than having not have that interaction between the characters. And that final episode was so it was so good.
Yeah,
episode I
love the way it starts off, and really by extension, I love everything about Antony's character in these final episodes. The episode starts off where he's just sitting over the edge of the boat that they're in, and he's having to talk with Vorenus about how he's been scared of defeat all his life. Mm-hmm. That it's not nearly as bad as he would have thought. Life is enough. And it's at that point where he tries to, make peace with Octavian and say that he'll just live a quiet life in Egypt.
It's like,
and that's all he'll do. But at that point, he doesn't have the leverage for that. So unfortunate. But what's great is that about opening with that scene and then what we see of him throughout the episode, this is Antony completely laid bare, which is amazing. If you watch him at the beginning of the show where he's all confidence and putting up this, big image of himself where nothing phases him. And by the end, he's just, you see that fragile, scared human underneath, and it's it's remarkable. And what James Purefoy brings to that final episode, where when he's fooled into believing that Cleopatra has taken her own life, and he's just weeping uncontrollably, and you couldn't have imagined Antony expressing that kind of grief and sadness at the beginning of the series. And it just shows how he's had every layer of himself stripped away until that moment.
And that final scene with him and Vorenus,
that is one of my favorite scenes in any film or television show. It's when Vorenus says, "It's been an honor serving with you, sir." And it's the way Antony says, "Has it?" Just that he's hoping that it has, and he doubts it. He's like, "Really?" And he says, "Well, I hope so."
Yeah. Well, he knows he's done some very questionable things. He's asked Vorenus time and time and time again to compromise his honor and his code of ethics, to do things that are, beneficial, for reasons, political reasons or what have you. It might have been politically expedient. It might have been to get, justify things that were to hold the republic together, to prevent bloodshed or what have you. Like the bigger picture is to do the, it's just, like death by 1,000 cuts of, you know, where his honor would have been at the beginning, and then by, you know, how much he felt like he may have lost in the end to, you know, to have compromised. You know, Vorenus in Egypt has, I mean, he might be the only sane man there, but he's definitely, you know, not the man he was when we started this journey with him, I think. Yeah. But him being there in the last moments of Mark Antony's life, and being there with him when he committed his final act of, you know, the honor death.
Yeah, and the way that he makes him presentable
Yes,
after death is so touching.
it
And
is. It is. He takes all the trappings that, you know, that he's put on, and that's all it was. You see, as it's coming off, you know, that was a face, a mask that, you know, Antony put on at this in Egypt, because that was what was expected of someone in the court of Cleopatra, to, you know, when in Rome, act like Romans. When in, you know, when in Alexandria, act like the Alexandrians, to, you know, to fit in, to gain power, to gain influence. So he put a mask on, and it, you know, he had the makeup on, he had the dress, you know, of the Egyptians. But I mean, for practical reasons, let's face it, it's hot
and it's interesting because it shows you that, you know, intolerance and, you know, racism, all of that stuff, it's at play in every civilization, you know, going all the way. I mean, obviously, then, and you see how that's used against Antony, because he adopts the culture of the Egyptians, and that's used to turn the Roman people against him.
Yes,
because they find it all to be barbaric and
intolerable to their highly refined Roman sensibilities. Oh, they worship dogs and cats there. Cleopatra will have us doing whatever, and, you know, and it was all about her. And at first, it was like she's twisted Mark Antony to her will. You know, she's this wicked queen of the East that has corrupted this good Roman citizen, and she's coming for you and your children next. So
and this is a good time to give a shout out to the newsreader.
Oh yes, the newsreader. Every episode
played by Ian McNeice, which it really struck me this season because so much changes in Rome and in the story, and the fact that we have the newsreader as the constant throughout the entire series, it's really cool. And you know, and I think it's easy for that actor's performance to, you know, be underrated in the show, but he does a great job, and he's very entertaining to watch.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, he'll be announcing and of course it's all spin as to from whoever is in charge at the, you know, whoever holds the capital at the time, puts out the you know, the spin on the events or whatever's going on. Like, you know, in joyous brotherhood, these two fine whatevers come together, and just he's just so dramatic in the way he uses his hands. And then in the next sentence, he'll say, and there's going to be an auction of some very fine slaves from so and so, at, you know, excellent slaves from this one to this one at bargain prices, you know, something for everyone. It's just, I love it. So it's really like, you know, it's like a peek into, you know, we see the political stuff, but at the same time we see, you know, the mundane and stuff. On everyday life for people as well. not just in the halls of politics.
Yeah. So, while oh wait, I do want to backtrack a little bit before the scene where Antony commits suicide. Really, that whole sequence where Cleopatra has received the offer from Octavian and to basically, to betray Antony, alive or dead, and the way she's kind of falling apart at sort of weighing which way to go. Again, it's the actress's performance. Her name is Lindsay Marshall, and with you just so believe this turmoil that she's going through, and with such a short amount of time in the episodes to pull that off. It's amazing that it's not just a question of their chemistry, but the performance that she gives. She pours so much emotion into it.
It's her presence, her on-screen presence. I could see her being Cleopatra very easily.
Yeah.
And just that scene, between the two of them after the defeat at Actium, they're just there together. It's just they've left the final, or they're having an orgy. Of course they are. They've got to keep up appearances, but it's kind of like live while we live. That scene where they're talking about the time they've spent together and how much they mean to one another, and while we were here we lived. I think that is just so moving that their time together they haven't had like years and years and years together. They've had a few years together. They've got 2 kids. They're very young. And the time that they've spent together has been so meaningful to both of them. So it's just a very touching scene between the two of them. And she's, Antony's like, well, if we're going to, let's do it now. And then you see her hesitate that little bit by saying, oh no, not in the dark. Let's wait till morning, wait till in the morning, because she's contemplating that offer in the back of her head, even though she has all this, emotion and feeling for Antony. She's still a mother.
Yeah.
And she's thinking about her children as well. What's going to become of her children. So
but then she has that meeting with Octavian, and the way that she just falls apart after that, she knows that she's doomed, and the way she, crawls up the steps and just,
gets in his lap, sits in Mark Antony's lap.
And she's, begging his...
He's dead, by the way. Yeah, he's dead.
It's just... God, it's so heartbreaking.
You just see she's just like this little girl that just doesn't know what to do. And she just wants some comfort in this world and some protection. And Mark Antony has really been the only protection that she's had. So
yeah, that's right, Leaf.
Lady Leaf. So, and then what does happen with the children, that was her biggest fear of what's going to become of Caesarion, especially.
And then, and then Vorenus, who is not, he's pissed off at her, for what she, and he says that he'll, take Caesarion to his father. She says, is he a good man? And he says, define good.
Good enough. He was good. Well, he was good enough for you.
Yeah.
But I love that scene too earlier where Caesarion is asking Vorenus about his father, his father.
Yeah, and he tells him about Pullo.
And yes, and he's just talking about his friend. And it's so I love that because he could answer the boy honestly, but in such a way that doesn't reveal that he wasn't, the son of Caesar, except for that part about he could clear the whole table. He had large appetites. But yeah, Pullo and Caesarion were hilarious. Absolutely. I love that little kid.
It's such a little pain, though.
He is. He's a little shit. And of course, he's compared, he has brought up his entire life. Not only, his father, he was told all his life, his father was the great Caesar Augustus, and he's the only actual supposedly child that, Caesar left. And his mother's is the queen of Egypt, and she's a living goddess. And so he's like part God. He's just raised with all of this entitlement his entire young life. I'm surprised he's not worse than this, because if you remember Ptolemy,
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's very true.
His uncle Ptolemy, his mother's brother, whatever, and what a little he was, Caesarian's not so bad. He, of course,
Well, probably in part because he's had Vorenus around.
Yes, he's had Vorenus around for, a few years now, a few of his later years. And
so, and that's actually, talking about things that probably would have been expanded upon if the show had gone longer. We probably would have gotten a great deal of the relationship and bonding between Caesarion and Vorenus, and it might have been tackled as that being Vorenus's second chance to actually, raise a child perhaps the correct way.
And it's very interesting too, because Vorenus left his children with Pullo back in Rome to care for and protect, because how bad their relationship was. But he still wanted to make sure that they were, that they were lovingly cared for, and he knew Pullo would protect them with his life. And then at the same time, on the other side of, the empire, he's taking a hand in raising Pullo's son. And, it's just really great to see those two parallels like that, because while Pullo has Lucian, he's not his actual biological son, but he thinks, he's his son. He's teaching him, no, don't be, he wants to go out and fight. Can I go with you? Can I go with you? And he's like, no, trying to dissuade him from going into like the life of a soldier. And he's like, these are things that his father would want for him. He was trying to raise him the way that Vorenus would want him to be raised, and have like no part in war and the military. And then, and over there, it's like Vorenus is kind of instilling these things into, Caesarion, just talking about his father, not what's publicly known, but what's privately known. He was a good man. He did this. He liked this. He did, he did these things. So, yeah, I think it was a really good example of, that parallel.
So Vorenus takes off with Caesarion, and Pullo meets up with them, and they're trying to make their way through Egypt and escape. And of course they come upon some Roman soldiers, and Caesarion blows the cover by responding in the Egyptian, and which Pullo is like, told you.
Told you. Because
And
he knows his boy. He couldn't keep his mouth shut. This little kid. It's like this little kid's going to give the game away. First chance he gets. Sure enough.
And so Vorenus is injured, asks Pullo to take him home because he's not going to die in this shithole.
Yeah. Yep. First.
So my question for you is that, we get to see Vorenus back at home and, he's finally reconciled with his children, but does he die?
That is quite a question that's left open. And I'm like, I thought to myself, maybe he didn't, because, there's that scene where Pullo goes to see Octavian and say, yeah, the deed is done. That Caesarion is dead. What happened to Vorenus? Oh yeah, Vorenus didn't make it, this and the other. And then, they go right outside and, there's little Caesarion that puts the lie to everything he said. He said, well, did he buy it? Did he buy it?
Yeah, so he's lying about one thing. So why not lie about the other? And actually, what's funny about that is that because when we see that Pullo has brought Vorenus back, and he's saying he should have died weeks ago, but he's been holding on. And then he's talking for a minute, and Vorenus says, "Well, thank you, Dr. Pullo."
Exactly.
And so
every impression to me that look, if this guy was going to die from his wounds in Egypt, he was that gravely injured in Egypt, and he's been hauled in a cart halfway across the empire, probably either, I don't know if they took ship back or somehow they got back to Rome, halfway around, and he's not dead yet. Really?
Yeah, it's funny because when I originally watched the show back in 2007, I assumed that he did die. But
I think he did not.
Watching this time around, I'm like, no, I don't think he did.
I think he, like Mark Antony said, I just want to live a quiet, private life here with my family. So he finally makes it back. He's reconciled with his children. He probably Antony is dead. The empire is going to have 75 years of peace. He can just live a quiet life on the.
But the question is, do they have to take off and go somewhere else because Rome isn't that the city isn't that big.
Well, true, but I think if he really wanted to stay there, I think he could have, but it's more likely that they probably, retired outside somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe to that farm that he and his wife had.
Yeah.
That his children would have inherited it. So technically they had land in the country, and they're always going out to the country to, whenever they had these happy family moments, they're always out in the country having picnics and whatnot, even though they might want to have to go do a murder or something. But, I can see Vorenus retiring to a quiet life in the country with his children outside of all the politics. He's dead to, Caesar thinks, I could see it very, very easily.
And I suspect that if they had gone ahead with the plans for the Rome movie, it would have definitively been said that he didn't die, because I can't imagine them doing that without him. So we might have found out definitively, but as for now, it's still up in the air. But you know what? I'm going to land on the side that he survived. And
that was the feeling that I got too. I really did, because Pullo wasn't sad at all. He didn't.
That's that whole scene after after he leaves from talking with Octavian is just great, and the way the way it ends with when Caesarion is talking about avenging
Mm-hmm.
his father, and Pullo says about your father.
Your father. Yeah, that was so good. I mean, that was so good. I hope that obviously he's going to, tell him about himself at that point. And I could just see, can't you just see these two together, like getting into all kinds of adventures? Because this is, Caesarion is obviously he's a very intelligent child who was raised to be, with all the education and skills needed to be, the ruler of Egypt. So he's very, very intelligent. Does he have a lot of street smarts? Probably not. So, and Pullo has got that in spades.
Yeah, he needs to learn it. And what's great is that Pullo has evolved into this person who he's equipped to be a father now. And it's probably the best thing in the world for him, because he's always talked about how he doesn't have that thing to really drive him outside of fighting. But now he has a son that he has to take care of. And I think and at the point that we see him at the end of the show, he's fully ready for that.
He's proud of him. He's like,
yeah.
Even when he's being a little shit, he's like, look at him. It's like, I can't believe I made this. I thought he'd be bigger. It's about the only comment he has to say about him, but I mean, I just love it.
Yeah. And also what I liked was earlier on, before before he goes to Egypt and Octavian is asking him to come, it's the point where Octavian says the boy Caesarion will have to die. And at that point, Pullo's like, this is not going to happen. But he's really good at wearing that mask of, being the loyal soldier to Octavian. And
yeah, so up until that point, he was like not really wanting to do it. He would have to leave he would have to leave Rome and go back. He wasn't really keen on this, especially having to maybe something bad happening to Vorenus or what have you. But once Caesarion's name is brought into the conversation, it's like, oh yeah. I'm definitely, I've got to do this. I've got to, to involve myself in this. So it's pretty cool, because he's taking on that fatherly role. He's going to try to do what he can to save this kid who he's never met.
Mm-hmm.
He's his, but he knows he's his, but he's never met him. And that's pretty cool that that's exactly what they use as the password between Pullo and Vorenus.
Private joke.
Private joke. It's just a private joke. Yeah. So it's obviously the message came from no one but Pullo, because it might be they're the only two people in the world besides, of course, Cleopatra. Oh yeah. I mean, it's not horrible. They could have ended up.
Yeah, I think all things considered, they end up in a pretty good place, because I think especially Attio will,
Mm-hmm. Oh, she's a spoil. She's like a spoiling type grandmother at this point,
Yeah.
with Antonia, and she's, go ahead.
And but yeah, it's interesting to see her transformation, because she softens up. I mean, not entirely, but over the course of the season, by the end, she's emotionally a lot more sort of open. And just the fact that when she finds out, halfway through the season, that Octavia is seeing Agrippa, the fact that she is perfectly fine with it. It shows that sort of evolution where she wants her daughter to find some happiness versus season 1 when she was, conniving to marry her off and kill her husband. It's like it shows the change in her.
Yeah,
And
their relationship is much better in season 2 than it was in season 1. I think they've kind of come to a place in both their lives where they can, see something in the other that they can respond to. So
yeah, we have to talk about it. Just it's one of the final sequences of the show,
Livia.
where Attia isn't going to go to the triumph, but then she decides to, and she puts on the face of strong Attia who's taking control, and that speech she delivers to Olivia, it's I'm not going to let a vicious little trollop like you go ahead of me. I go first.
Oh, absolutely. And
I can
better women than you.
I can see you right now. You're saying that you'll destroy me. Know this. Far better women than you have sworn to do the same. Go and look for them now.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Absolute Vamp move right there. She owned her in that moment. It was like, drop the mic, Alf, and I go first. Always. So, and power move. I mean, her costume in that, that power outfit that she has on with everybody else is in like the light colors, and then she comes in this royal blue gown with this red headdress. It's like, she's making that bold statement that she's all in these primary colors. I think that really she's going to stand out in the crowd, period. But yes, that really just brings her, just makes her stand out that much more.
Yeah.
Yes.
But of course, the flip side of that is as much strength that she shows in that moment, it's just all the more heartbreaking when she's sitting there and and you have both Antony and Cleopatra's corpses being paraded around, and you can see just the pain in her eyes, and it's so sad, and the fact that she's making a show of being triumphant in that moment, but in a way it's it's Servilia's curse coming to fruition.
Absolutely. She is thinking about Servilia in that moment. She had just given her comeuppance to Livia, basically saying, talking about her rivalry with Servilia. And then the next scene, she's sitting there and she has to be thinking about that, because here she is, her son is, he's the first citizen, he's having his triumph. This is what, like Octavia said, you've been working toward this your entire life, when she's trying to convince her to go to the triumph. This is what you have been working for, mother. And then she's there and there's no possible way she's enjoying it, because her lover is dead, who she really, really did love him. Her son, yes, he's first citizen, but he's a monster.
Yeah, it's that the way he looks over at her when after she sees Antony, and and it's I remember the first time I watched that, I was like, oh my God, is that those their corpses? And it's so horrific, and just the way he glances over at her, he's a monster. He really is. And all she can do is just look away.
Show no emotion. She cannot let any of it show, because that's what he's looking for. He wants to make sure she doesn't give any public show of sympathy or sentiment for this, his defeated enemy. Now, if you remember from the triumph of the first season, when Caesar had his triumph and he was parading, Vercingetorix through the streets of Rome, that would have been Cleopatra's fate. And then at the end of that triumph, how he was just, garroted at the end, and to die, just to die publicly in shame in front of the entire, Roman populace. Cleopatra knew if she was taken to Rome, that was going to be her fate.
Yeah.
So, the best that Octavian could get is parading their corpses through the street, but he was deprived of that final degradation that he would, have shown them. So, yes.
And so with that, we pretty much have brought it to the end. I am sure that there is some stuff that we missed along the way, because this was an epic season.
There was so much that was in here. I can't think of anything that, we didn't really talk about, but
I'm sure there was, but I think
there was, but we hit a lot of them.
I think we hit the major stuff of consequence, and certainly a lot of the stuff that I know I wanted to talk about. You guys in the chat, if there's anything that you want brought up, feel free to do so. I think we're going to wrap up in a couple minutes. We went a little bit over, but I think maybe we were, we went a little under what we did last time.
We kind of knew we were going to go over. We still didn't hit 3 hours, so I think
and I think that's because, with season 1 we went through in kind of beat by beat of the story. With this season, it's so enormous that I don't think we could have done that. So I thought, it was preferable if we just felt free to jump around and talk about, some of the major points. But
did anybody have any questions or, what have you?
Yeah, if some of you watching who haven't watched the show yet, again, you've been spoiled enormously.
Terribly spoiled.
But hopefully, it's it's made you interested, and the show is absolutely phenomenal. And I think we've probably communicated that we love it a great deal. And
just to tell you, I was watching the show, and my husband, he was like, he just came in and he said, "Are you watching Game of Thrones?" I said, "No, but yes and no." And I told him what I was watching. So, I had to do like a marathon stream of it. And I said, I'm kind of in season 2. And he's like, well, I want to listen to it. I'm like, okay. I said, well, you want to go back later and we'll just start from season 1 and we'll just go all the way through. And he's like, yeah, I want to see this like on the big, I was watching it on my tablet. He's like, yeah, I want to see this on the big screen. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves. What I do love about this show, despite I've said multiple times about how it would have been interesting to see the show extended for its full intended life, but what is nice is that it's a 22 episode series that I think it's easy to sit down and watch over a relatively short period of time, and it's so well told that it's one that you can revisit a lot.
Yeah, I did not feel cheated at all, with this show. Even though, like you said, we had all the things that they dealt with had to deal with in the second season. The writers did a fantastic job getting, plot by plot, beat by beat by beat. Every episode seems like it should have been 3.
And again, that's the thing about this season is it just felt so enormous that they really squeezed so much into 10 episodes, and
I don't think they shortchanged the character, because that's more what they focused on was the character dynamics as opposed to the broad scenes, the CGI battles, things like that. They poured their heart and soul into the characters and the interactions between them.
Yeah, I think if anything was sacrificed, maybe some of the supporting characters, especially a couple people they brought in season 2. But as far as all the main characters went, I thought they were very well served by the writing and the story that they chose to tell over the course of these episodes. And yeah, I thought it was excellent all the way through.
Everybody's ending was, even though they may not have gotten what they wanted, I felt like it was a very satisfying ending for them all. I don't feel like anything was left undone in any way. Yeah. And the costuming was great.
It goes without saying. Yeah.
Every episode, I'm like, what is Atia going to be wearing today? How is Octavia going to have her hair done?
Yeah, and speaking of Atia, I just, probably this has been made clear by now, but I really do think that she is one of the greatest characters in any television show. I mean, Polly Walker's performance is one for the ages. And
yeah, and like Anna said, she can't believe that she didn't win an Emmy for her performance. And
and that goes for the show. I mean, it's tough to believe that. I think that a lot of HBO shows during this time were kind of underappreciated. I'm not even sure that Deadwood got the acclaim that it. I mean, it probably got acclaim, but as far as awards recognition, I don't. It may have gotten a little bit, but I'm sure not nearly as much as it deserved. And it's
Deadwood is another show, guys. If you haven't watched it, that is something that is very, very, very binge worthy. Take your time. It's great.
Yeah, Deadwood was a show that kind of took the opposite approach to being canceled. Once it came out that they weren't going to continue, they wrapped up their 3rd season pretty much as they had planned to. And then we had nothing for years and years and years until they finally just did the Deadwood movie last year, which was quite satisfying for this viewer. But it was done in such a way that it felt like it's basically catching up with all the characters all these years after the show had been off the air. But we won't get too far into that. That's for
we'll get another one we can do later on, John.
That might be a future stream. I'm going to be, just so you guys know, I am going to be focusing a bit more on films moving forward, although I do have one TV show on the horizon coming up, but that's only going to take 1 week. But am going to lean more heavily on films for the foreseeable future. And once again, I got some great guests coming up, and I think you guys are going to be really excited. So, and just to say again, next week we have Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet, which I will be talking about with Lauren, aka Shakespeare of Thrones. So tune in for that. That'll be next Friday, not Thursday, but Friday at 2:00 p.m. You have anything you want to say before we sign off, Nessie?
No, just glad that you invited me on to talk about this show. I really had a great time revisiting this excellent show. I'd forgotten how good it was. And I've really enjoyed my rewatch. I don't have anything planned for the near future for my channel. Um, well, I do a lot of like in-depth research for mine, so I'm not able to, crank out something every week or so. But I'd like to, maybe in the next 2 to 3 weeks that I should have something ready for content. But lots of things on the back burner that I'm, working on, percolating on, and still busy with Here Be Dragons. And thank you for having me on your channel. So we've got a lot going on. Plus, if you guys didn't know, I mean, I am very busy with my actual job. I'm a respiratory therapist. So with everything that's going on with the virus and the state of the healthcare right now, I'm kept very busy. So my actual time to do things that are fun is kind of getting a little limited. So not that I don't want to, but soon I'll have something for you guys to enjoy.
Okay, and with that said, I think we'll go ahead and sign off. Please, if you guys would, if you enjoyed this, please share it around so we can get some more people watching the channel and watching Rome, because it's a show that definitely deserves to be seen by more and more people. And if you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. And yeah, I guess
content.
And Nessie, since you enjoyed doing this, I guess I should probably have you back at some point in the future, shouldn't I? I mean,
I'm here to talk about stuff and things. So yeah, and I think we had kind of discussed talking about a certain film coming up in the not too distant future, maybe.
Oh, did we? Oh yeah, I guess we might have. I guess you guys should stay tuned for that. Maybe there's an announcement coming up in the next couple weeks. We'll see. Yeah, Leaf is saying, why are you wasting time saving lives instead of?
Yeah, I mean, somebody's got to do it,
No, in all honesty, though, we all appreciate it, Nessie. This is a really tough time for everybody, and you are just doing amazing work. And I know we all thank you from the bottom of our hearts. So,
hey, man, it's what I do. It's my passion. It's my other passion. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't be doing it. So, just glad I'm able to do my small part.
Okay, I think that's about it. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed going through this show with us. And like I said, if you haven't watched it yet, get on it. It's fantastic. So, okay, so that's it. And I will see you guys next Friday. Well, actually, we will both see you on Sunday on Here Be Dragons. But after that, I'll see you guys on Friday next week. And thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.